Time. I'm Avi Bernard in for Areva Martin, and let's get you caught up. A federal judge ruled today that Rudy Giuliani is liable for defaming two Georgia election workers by repeatedly declaring that they had mishandled ballots while counting votes in Atlanta during the 2020 election. The ruling means that the defamation case against Mr. Giuliani can proceed to trial on the question of how much, if any, damages he will have to pay to the plaintiffs in the case. The decision came a little more than a month after Rudy Giuliani conceded in two stipulations in the case that he had made false statements when he accused the election workers, both Black women, Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, of manipulating ballots while working at the State Farm Arena for the Fulton County Board of Elections. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell appeared to freeze again today, this time during a gaggle with reporters in Covington, Kentucky, stopping for more than 30 seconds after he was asked if he would run for re-election. The Kentucky Republican froze in July at a news conference on Capitol Hill, going silent for 19 seconds before being escorted away from the cameras. 81-year-old McConnell returned shortly after and continued his news conference, telling reporters he's fine. But when it became apparent that McConnell had frozen again today, an aide came up to him and asked if he had heard the question. And McConnell continued to be unresponsive. Once McConnell re-engaged, he responded briefly to another couple questions, both of which he needed to have repeated by his aide, and then he left. Some Republicans in Washington and Georgia began attacking Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis immediately after she announced the August 14th indictment of Donald Trump for conspiring to overturn the 2020 presidential election results. But others, including Georgia Governor Brian Kemp, have been conspicuous in their unwillingness to pile on. Kemp, who had previously survived scathing attacks from Trump over his refusal to endorse Trump's false claims about the election, declined to comment on the indictment of Trump and 18 others at a conservative political conference. Kemp stated forcefully that Democratic President Joe Biden was the rightful winner of Georgia's 16 electoral votes. Newspaper chain Gannett has paused the use of an artificial intelligence tool to write high school sports dispatches after the technology made several major flubs in articles in at least one of its papers. Several high school sports reports written by an AI service called Lead AI and published by the Columbus Dispatch earlier this month went viral on social media, and not in a good way. The reports were mocked on social media for being repetitive, lacking key details, using odd language, and generally sounding like they'd been written by a computer with no actual knowledge of sports. CNN identified several other local Gannett outlets, including the Louisville Courier Journal, AZ Central, Florida Today, and the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, that have all published similar stories written by Lead AI in recent weeks. The AI tool debacle comes after Gannett axed hundreds of jobs in December when it laid off 6% of its news division. And Canadian right-wing pundit Jordan Peterson is facing backlash after telling MSNBC anchor Mehdi Hassan that he's not really brown. On Saturday, Hassan delivered a monologue in which he had a direct message for the white conservative community following the racist attack in Jacksonville, Florida. The shooter was a 21-year-old white supremacist who killed 3 Black people at a Dollar General store. Peterson responded to the monologue with a comment on X, formerly known as Twitter, that said, quote, "You're not really brown, more like a light tan, just like white people, plus you're a Caucasian by definition, buddy," close quote. When we come forward, I am going to be talking to Mike Hayes, freelance journalist and author of The Secret Files, Bill de Blasio, the NYPD, and the Broken Promises of Police Reform. I'm going to talk about an article he's written about a striking case where the NYPD killed one of their own, killed a colleague, and despite video evidence that refuted some of the statements they made, those statements were allowed to stand. And I want to get into this conversation with Mike as soon as we come forward right here on KBLA Talk 1580.
Follow the leader. KBLA Talk 1580. Follow the leader.
Be sure to follow us on Instagram at KBLA 1580.
Follow the leader.
Are you ready?
The station leading the way with exclusive interviews,
Follow the leader.
stimulating conversation, and intellectual discourse that empowers, enlightens, and informs.
Follow the leader.
Follow the leader at KBLA 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
Keep following the leader.
Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader.
Gotta stay fresh, my.
Have you visited us online for the grand opening of KBLA.store? For the best in new merch, gift ideas, books, media, and more, log on to KBLA.store. Be sure to check out our KBLA team favorites at KBLA.store today. That's KBLA.store for all the official merch on your favorite talk radio station, KBLA Talk 1580.
Here comes the brand new flavor in your head.
Race, social justice, sports, politics, art, music, culture. We do it all on the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show. If you're not tuning in, then you are definitely missing out. It's the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show, weekdays from 2 to 4 only on unapologetically progressive KBLA Talk 1580.
Like a brand new flavor in your head.
This is a rather bold pronouncement, but we think we can back it up. If you come across a radio frequency anywhere putting more variety and more diversity on the air than KBLA Talk 1580, we sure would like to hear about your discovery.
You got to have vision.
You can search, but we are confident that you won't find more shows covering more topics, hosted by a more diverse and inclusive lineup of talkers than the squad we have assembled here at KBLA Talk 1580.
This is the time, brothers. This is the time.
We've got something for everybody.
That's right.
Health and healing, history and humor, issues and events, empowerment and entertainment, all in one station.
What's really going on?
Free enterprise, you dig?
KBLA Talk 1580.
Yes.
Oh yeah. We got a lot to talk about.
King Kong ain't got on me.
If you're not listening to Tavis Smiley weekday mornings on KBLA Talk 1580, you're missing out. Everybody wants to talk to Tavis.
That's one reason, by the way, why I'm so thrilled to have this conversation with you today. The three people I always most hoped would interview me were Phil Donahue, Studs Terkel, and Tavis Smiley. Donahue's retired, Terkel's deceased, so this is a real thrill for me. And the reason why I have such respect for what you do is you have a historically informed conversation of depth and detail.
Be sure to tune in to Tavis Smiley weekday mornings, 9 a.m. to 12 noon on your unapologetically progressive radio station, KBLA Talk 1580. KBLA Talk 1580.
Welcome back to Areva Martin in Real Time. I'm Avi Bernard in for Areva Martin today. As every cop knows, one person is responsible for Brian's death, and that's the person carrying a loaded, illegal gun and decided to run from the police. Every cop knows that, and every New Yorker should know that. Those are the words of former Commissioner James O'Neill, who was talking about a officer named Brian Mulkeen who had been killed in the line of duty. I'm joined now by Mike Hayes, a freelance reporter and author. And Mike, very powerful story you've written in ProPublica. I wanted to have you on to talk about this, and eventually I want to get to your book as well. But just can you just walk us through what happened that night, or what at first what the NYPD said happened?
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much for having me on, Avi. It's great to talk to you. So this goes back to 2019, night in September in the Bronx, New York. Officer Mulkeen was working with a unit of cops that specialize in finding illegal guns and getting them off the street. And shortly after midnight, they stopped a man in a housing project by the name of Antonio Williams. Mr. Williams had an illegal handgun on him. So when the officers identified themselves as the police, he took off running, and Officer Mulkeen and one of his colleagues took off after him. Officer Mulkeen eventually caught up to Antonio, took him down to the ground, and a struggle ensued. And it appeared to Officer Mulkeen and another officer on the scene that Mr. Williams was going for the gun in his waistband. So Officer Mulkeen pulled out his firearm and shot the suspect 5 times, killing him. But at the same time, several other officers who were in the area responded to a radio call about the chase, and when they arrived, they fired towards the two men wrestling on the ground from a distance of about 60 to 70 feet away. And one of the bullets that was fired hit Officer Mulkeen in the head, and he died that night. And the NYPD, it wasn't until the next day that the NYPD came out and admitted that what had happened was an incident of, as it's commonly known, friendly fire had occurred, and that's how Officer Mulkeen died.
So can you talk about the statements that officers made initially and how they were proven false by the body cam footage that the officers were wearing that night?
Sure. So initially what happened here, and this is kind of the early days of the NYPD's body camera program, but they did put out a edited compilation of body camera footage from 5 of the officers who were part of this incident that night. And they put that out a couple months after it happened. And it's about 13 minutes of footage on YouTube, a couple minutes from each officer. But it doesn't tell the whole story at all. It's heavily edited. Most of it is silent, and you don't get a great picture of what happened to Officer Mulkeen from looking at that footage. And that was sort of the initial storytelling that the NYPD did in the months after this tragic event. And then eventually, about a year later, they quietly closed the case. It was investigated by a group called the Force Investigation Division, which is a special unit within NYPD's internal affairs that looks at all incidents where officers at the NYPD fire their weapons or kill somebody in the line of duty. So they look at arguably the most serious use of force cases in the department. So they did their investigation. They actually spent, I think I just misspoke, they spent about 2 years doing that investigation, and then just kind of quietly found no wrongdoing by the officers. And it wasn't until last week when we published our story with ProPublica that New Yorkers and anyone else interested got a chance to kind of hear the full story of what happened that night.
And so what is the full story? Because you said that they heavily edited that footage, which to me, what's the point of body cam footage if you can just edit whatever parts you want and publish those like a mixtape? Just have whatever parts of you might as well not be wearing the body camera footage if you can just take out the parts that make you look bad. So how are they able to do that? Did they represent that the footage had been edited?
So they didn't make it sound quite as exciting as you just did there, Avi, calling it a mixtape. But that's essentially what they did here is I've been calling it a compilation of footage. But to answer your question there directly, what they said was that what they were putting out there was showing all the, quote, relevant parts of the video. They felt, in their opinion, that the minutes after the shooting and in some cases with some of the officers, the immediate seconds after the shooting apparently weren't relevant for people to see when they decided to put out what they made public. And, fortunately, for the purposes of telling our story at ProPublica, we were able to get our hands on the full, complete body camera footage from that night, which showed some pretty harrowing stuff.
So ProPublica is a top-notch outlet that investigates abuses of power. ProPublica has really just blew the lid off of Clarence Thomas and his abuses of power, and just done a really good job on many really important stories, and now including this one. How did you, and you're a freelance journalist, but how did you and the people you're working with at ProPublica get your hands on this footage, or even know that there was more footage to be had?
Yeah, so I have been interested in this particular unit at the NYPD, the Force Investigation Division, going back a couple years now. Since I was working on my book, I wrote about another case that they investigated, a man named Miguel Antonio Richards, who was killed in the Bronx in 2017, and that incident was also captured on body camera. That was actually the first fatal police shooting in New York captured on officer body camera. So ever since I got interested in this part of the NYPD's internal affairs operation, I've been putting public records requests in for various cases that I just knew about a little bit in the media. And this was one, the killing of Officer Mulkeen was one that was, top of mind when I was thinking about which cases to request the records for, because his death did get a considerable amount of media coverage when it happened, although as we've been talking about, at the time, the media wasn't really able to dig too deep into the actual events of the shooting. So I mean, the short story is I got it all through FOIL requests, or at least parts of it. The NYPD actually denied my request for the key elements that allowed us to tell this story at ProPublica, those being the full body camera footage, as well as the audio of the officers' interviews that they did with internal investigators. When I requested that material, they said that giving it to me would have been violated the officer's privacy. Fortunately, I was able to get that stuff from a source anyway. But it's very interesting that they denied me the opportunity, the police department, that is, denied me the opportunity to just get this stuff through my public records requests.
Yeah, and kind of a little sidebar there. That's really interesting. How are they able to deny the public records request when it's material that is supposed to be part of the public records, right?
Well, in my opinion, yes, it's supposed to be part of the public record, but that's not just my opinion. Actually, in two other cases prior to writing about the killing of Officer Mulkeen, when I requested all of the internal investigation materials, including the complete body camera footage and the audio of the officer interviews, I was able to get it through public records requests from the department. The first case being that case I mentioned that I wrote about for my book, the killing of Miguel Richards, as well as another case that we wrote about for ProPublica recently in the last couple months, the death of a man named Kowalski Trawick, who was shot while he was cooking dinner in his apartment. I will say that while I was going through the process of getting the records, trying to ascertain the video and the audio in Officer Mulkeen's shooting, that story did come out, revealing problems with the internal investigation into the killing of Kowalski Trawick. So I can't say that publishing that material, which did not make the department look particularly good, I can't say for sure that it influenced their decision to deny me the records in this case. But I thought the timing was interesting.
Interesting to say the least. I mean, is that, as a journalist, is that a red flag for you when you make a Public Records Act request for something that is supposed to be granted to you, and then they say, actually, no, we don't want to give that to you? Does that give you even more curiosity and kind of get your spidey sense tingling that, you know what, I'm on the right path here? If they're not giving me what I'm asking for, that means that I really need to see what I'm asking for.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I should say none of this being denied, being delayed, any sort of hurdle that happened while trying to get those records. It's just it's just part of the job. It just comes with the territory. I'm never. I remain undaunted by those sorts of roadblocks. If anything, it's just like you said, it does just get me more motivated to try to fight for this stuff, to shine some sunlight on what should be made publicly available.
Yeah, journalism is absolutely a thankless profession. It's so much work behind the scenes. You work for months on a story, for the story to finally be published, and now lately, the last few years, real credible journalists are getting trashed by mostly people on the right, and it's really sad to see. But I want to talk a little bit more about this case, and so the body cam footage proves that not everything went down the way the officers said it went down, right? And so why did that slide in the investigation? And this is an internal investigation, correct? And is this the case of officers investigating themselves, and so they basically just didn't want to get themselves in trouble?
Yeah, so just to give you the full context, again, this is the Force Investigation Division that we're talking about at the NYPD, and they were established in 2015 by former NYPD Commissioner Bill Bratton. After Eric Garner was killed in 2014, he ushered in a series of reforms as he was being pressured by the public to bring changes to the NYPD after Officer Daniel Pantaleo, now former Officer Daniel Pantaleo, killed Eric Garner with a chokehold, and everybody across the world saw that on video. So this is one of the things he did. Commissioner Bratton was established the Force Investigation Division. Basically, what he said was he was going to set up this elite group of internal investigators, and their purview would be the most serious, like I was saying before, the most serious cases at the department. Anytime an officer fires their gun, they also investigate anytime an officer commits suicide, and other serious uses of force like chokeholds and things like that. So this is really supposed to be the elite of the elite when it comes to internal investigators. It's interesting, talking to you guys out in LA, because this was actually an idea that Bratton brought over from something that he did when he was running the LAPD. They have the Force Investigation Division inside their department as well. I have no idea how well it's going or not going, but I just know that it exists. So yeah, and what we've started to find by getting our hands on some of their internal investigation records, which is what I had in this case, is we're finding that the supposedly elite investigators within the NYPD, they just aren't asking hard questions, and also aren't digging into utilizing the new technology to their advantages. They now have body-worn camera footage for all these incidents. They can get a point of view on video of what happened. But in some cases, they're just ignoring what they see and not asking officers about it. So the most egregious example of that in this case is after those officers fired their weapons from about 70 feet away towards Officer Mulkeen and a suspect literally wrestling on the ground. They were firing, from 20 yards away at two people rolling around, one of which was their colleague. Two other officers who were had gotten up close to that wrestling match and were themselves in the line of fire. As soon as those shots rang out from a sidewalk about 60 feet away, they start yelling, "Stop shooting," repeatedly, "Stop shooting, stop shooting," to their fellow officers. One of the officers, you see him on camera jump back naturally, right? Because bullets were flying in his direction, and he yells, "Stop shooting." So this was some of the footage that the NYPD did not release when they released their mixtape of footage. But even more glaring here, when it got to the point where investigators were interviewing the officers who were involved, they never asked them about those commands.
Let me pause you right there. Mike, we're up against a news, sports and traffic update, and I want you to finish that thought when we come forward, because now we're getting down to it. The Force Investigative Division. I want to get more into who they are. They're just regular officers, but I want to hear that point you're making when we come forward right here on KBLA Talk 1580.
Gotta stay fresh, my house shot with a rest bar,
Have you visited us online for the grand opening of KBLA.store? For the best in new merch, gift ideas, books, media, and more, log on to KBLA.store. Be sure to check out our KBLA team favorites at KBLA.store today. That's KBLA.store for all the official merch on your favorite talk radio station, KBLA Talk 1580.
The bounce is back.
Here comes the brand new flavor in your head.
Race, social justice, sports, politics, art, music, culture. We do it all on the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show. If you're not tuning in, then you are definitely missing out. It's the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show, weekdays from 2 to 4, only on unapologetically progressive KBLA Talk 1580.
Like a brand new flavor in your head.
This is a rather bold pronouncement, but we think we can back it up. If you come across a radio frequency anywhere putting more variety and more diversity on the air than KBLA Talk 1580, we sure would like to hear about your discovery.
You got to have vision.
You can search. We are confident that you won't find more shows covering more topics, hosted by a more diverse and inclusive lineup of talkers than the squad we have assembled here at KBLA Talk 1580.
This is the time, brothers. This is the time.
We've got something for everybody.
That's right.
Health and healing, history and humor, issues and events, empowerment and entertainment, all in one station.
What's really going on?
Free enterprise, you dig?
KBLA Talk 1580.
Yes.
Oh yeah. We got a lot to talk about.
King Kong ain't got on me.
If you're not listening to Tavis Smiley weekday mornings on KBLA Talk 1580, you're missing out. Everybody wants to talk to Tavis.
That's one reason, by the way, why I'm so thrilled to have this conversation with you today. The three people I always most hoped would interview me were Phil Donahue, Studs Terkel, and Tavis Smiley. Donahue's retired, Terkel's deceased, so this is a real thrill for me. And the reason why I have such respect for what you do is you have a historically informed conversation of depth and detail.
Be sure to tune in to Tavis Smiley weekday mornings, 9 a.m. to 12 noon on your unapologetically progressive radio station, KBLA Talk 1580. KBLA Talk 1580.
Is the pen mightier than the sword?
They say the pen is mightier than the sword. At KBLA Talk 1580, we not only have a lot to talk about, we have a lot to write about. politics, relationships, business, empowerment, and culture. The all-star roster at KBLA Talk 1580 has you covered.
That's what it's all about.
Be sure to follow us on all our socials for our latest book releases, op-eds, essays, and commentaries from our hosts. And, of course, download the KBLA 1580 app as we strive to remain your most trusted, credible, and reliable source for the issues you care about. This is unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
What up, baby?
I'm young, gifted, and black.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we do more than just talk.
Hey there, I'm Jared Hill, president of the National Association of Black Journalists of Los Angeles, and I just want to say thank you for the benevolent $10,000 donation and scholarships for the next generation of black journalists.
And I'm Haywood Galbraith, photojournalist and founder of the Minority Photojournalism Institute. Thanks, KBLA, for your generous $10,000 scholarship gift to help us train the next generation of black photojournalists.
Congratulations to all the students who will benefit from the scholarship dollars raised at our Black History Month luncheon, honoring black legends in LA media. When we come forward at KBLA Talk 1580, we're bringing everybody with us. Everybody with us. Everybody with us. Everybody with us. Everybody with us.
Connection established. Access granted.
In a survey conducted by the public opinion research firm Eviderus, KBLA Talk 1580 consistently emerged as the station of choice for black audiences in the Los Angeles media market and beyond. The survey also revealed that the vast majority of black audiences are concerned about the lack of black-owned media and are more likely to listen to talk radio that focuses on issues that impact the black community. For some reason, the other talk stations haven't quite figured that out.
If you think about KFI, well, KFI only has like a 3% black listenership. 3%. So there's a good 97% out there to support a station like KBLA.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black. Your black. Your black.
Follow the leader.
KBLA Talk 1580.
Follow the leader.
Be sure to follow us on Instagram at KBLA 1580.
Follow the leader.
Are you ready?
The station leading the way with exclusive interviews,
Follow the leader.
stimulating conversation, and intellectual discourse that empowers, enlightens, and informs.
Follow the leader.
Follow the leader at KBLA 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
Keep following the leader.
Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader.
Gotta stay fresh, my house shot with a rest spot. Shot with a rest spot. Shot with a rest spot.
Have you visited us online for the grand opening of KBLA.store? For the best in new merch, gift ideas, books, media, and more, log on to KBLA.store. Be sure to check out our KBLA team favorites at KBLA.store today. That's KBLA.store for all the official merch on your favorite talk radio station, KBLA Talk.
And we're back on Areva Martin in real time. Avi Bernard in for Areva Martin tonight. And we are talking to Mike Hayes, freelance journalist, and also the author of The Secret Files, Bill de Blasio, the NYPD, and The Broken Promises of Police Reform. But Mike, you were in the middle of getting to the part that the officers or the NYPD intentionally removed from their mixtape. And you said something also in near the beginning of this conversation that there was no audio in any of the tape they released, correct?
There was some audio in some of what they put out there. It's kind of a funny thing the way these body cameras seem to work that officers are using. When they hit record on their camera, it records for 30 seconds to a minute in silence. I'm not going to be able to explain to you why that's the case with the technology, but what can happen and did happen in this case is if you start recording as something bad is about to happen, and the most the most tragic part of the incident happens in that first 30 to 60 second window, then it happens in silence. So we in this particular case, a lot of the because what happened here is the officers who arrived on the scene and shot from about 70 feet away and hit Officer Mulkeen in the head. They arrived on the scene, hopped out of their car, ran 20, 30 feet, or ran, I'm not sure how far they ran, but they only ran for a matter of seconds before they pulled their guns out and started shooting. And that was, in some officers' cases, right in the beginning of when they were recording the incident. So that happened in silence. And yeah, so a lot of what the NYPD put out on their YouTube channel happened to be from those first few seconds and happened to be silent.
So you have officers shooting at Officer Brian Mulkeen while he's on the ground wrestling with Antonio Williams. The both of them are on the ground together in the same spot, essentially, and they're being fired upon by NYPD officers. And those officers are also firing on other officers who are kind of chasing down the action, right? And so, and you said one of those officers kind of stops because he can either hear and or feel the bullets whizzing by him. So my question is, why would the officer, I know that they ended up shooting Brian Mulkeen in the head, and so why would the officers want to protect the other officers who were clearly being reckless? And in addition to the worst thing that I guess any of them would probably want to do, which was kill a colleague, obviously endangering a citizen who ultimately did die as well at the hands of Brian Mulkeen. So why are Brian Mulkeen's colleagues trying to protect the colleagues who are responsible for this?
Well, I don't know that it's so much that they're trying to protect their colleagues. I think it's more of a case, and this is might sound kind of strange. It is strange to me. They're just not being asked the right questions by the internal investigators in these cases. Give you an example. I was talking before we went to the break about one of the officers, or two of the officers who were up close to Officer Mulkeen when he got shot. They yelled to their colleagues who were shooting from 60 feet away, "Stop shooting." But they were never asked about that in their interview. And one of the officers was asked after the shooting stopped, "Did you say anything?" And he said no. And the investigators had all this footage. They know for a fact that, yes, he did say something. He said, "Stop shooting." But they never pressed him on that. They just moved on to the next question, which was had nothing to do with any sort of commands that he was giving to his colleagues. So it's just.
Well, let me follow up with you on that, Mike. Let me follow up with you on that, because you said that you're not sure if they're protecting him. They're just asking the wrong questions, but asking the wrong questions intentionally. It can be an intentional thing. It can be an intentional choice as an interviewer, which questions you ask, which you know will have the higher potential to be incriminating, and questions that you're not going to ask. You can throw softball questions at someone who is in some serious trouble if you're trying to protect them. So, obviously motive is a difficult thing to determine, but I mean, if I'm interviewing someone, if you and me, Mike, are colleagues, right? And we're both police officers, and you're involved in officer-involved shooting, I can say, so do you think that the guy did you think the guy had a gun? Sure. Did you fear for your life? Sure. And those are gonna be the only questions I ask you, and then I don't have to ask you any of the other details. And I'm not saying, obviously, this is a hypothetical example. I'm not saying which questions that they did ask specifically, but as you said, they weren't asking the right ones. And so is that potentially why was that intentional on their part, perhaps, in an attempt to protect their fellow officers? I mean, this is the Force Investigative Division, and who are these investigators? Are they just regular officers, or are they someone from outside of the force?
So they're all officers. They're all officers who have at least made the rank of detective. And in some cases, the supervisors in the group are ranked even higher than that: sergeant, lieutenant, deputy chief, etc. So these are seasoned investigators at the NYPD who are supposed to have the experience to be able to go out and gather all the facts. And I would really encourage all your listeners to go to ProPublica and check out our story, because we were able to piece together what I think is a really great video that includes a lot of this never before released footage that I've been talking about, as well as audio from the officers' interviews. And you really get this weird feeling. It's honestly the best way I can describe it. It's just weird listening to these kind of formulaic, unemotional, uninterested interviews, where one thing that really struck me was anytime an officer gave an interview, the head of FID, by an officer by the name of Kevin Maloney, who's was the head of the Force Investigation Division and conducted a lot of these interviews. He would get an answer from these officers, and the next word out of his mouth would be "okay." And then, like I was talking about before, no follow-up, no, are you sure that's what happened? Because we have on video, you actually did say something after the shots were fired. You said, "Stop shooting." Why did you say stop shooting to your fellow officers? Instead of asking that follow-up question, he just goes, "Okay." Another really glaring example in the story that we talk about is two of the officers. There were three total who fired from about 70 feet away at Officer Mulkeen, and the Bronx DA's office concluded that one of those three officers is, in fact, the officer that shot him in the head. Two of those officers said they were much closer when they were asked how close they were. They estimated they were about 20 to 30 feet away, which that's a big difference, right? I mean, between 60 to 70 feet and 20 feet away, especially when you're talking about somebody trying to aim a firearm and hit a target. And again, when they running. Correct. Yeah. Like I was saying before, it all happened within seconds of them getting out of their car. But yet again, when that came up in the interview, when they asked, how far away were you? I was 20 feet away. And the officers, the investigators, they have the correct information. They were actually out there the night of the shooting, working with the crime scene team to determine the actual distance that these officers shot from. So they know they shot from 3 times that distance compared to the answer that they just gave in the interview. Mm-hmm. And they never ask them, they never correct them. They never ask them if they want to correct their answer. It's just
doesn't that sound intentional? That sounds like it has to be intentional.
I put very detailed questions, Avi, about all this stuff to the NYPD, and they never got back to me about it. I would love to hear from them. We requested an interview with the head of the unit who conducted these interviews to try to get him to explain, what was going on here, and they wouldn't engage.
Of course they wouldn't. So Kevin Maloney is the man who was doing a lot of these interviews, and that just sounds like a Gotham City villain. It sounds like someone. I've never heard anything about Kevin Maloney before this conversation with you, Mike, but that sounds like someone who is a corrupt Gotham City police officer. That's just what it sounds like. It rhymes with Carmine Falcone. I mean, listen. I'm just talking about what it sounds like to me. I have no basis in fact on that, other than he obviously intentionally, and in my opinion, this is not you saying this, is just me, intentionally let his fellow officers off the hook. Before we move on to your book, though, Mike, is there anything else about your reporting in the story, or anything that you learned since that we haven't mentioned that you wanted to mention?
Yeah, I mean, well, I'll just end with the thought that this story is not over. Officer Mulkeen's family has filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the city of New York and the department. Their lawsuit has been on hold in part because these internal investigations have taken so long. But this family, they initially came out and were very thankful and appreciative of the department. And you mentioned at the beginning of the segment, you quoted what the former police commissioner said at during his eulogy at Brian's funeral. So they have since done a complete 180 and now are suing for they have a wrongful death lawsuit against the department, and they accuse the officers that were working with Brian that night of acting, egregiously reckless and irresponsible. So I'm very interested to see what happens with that case.
Wildly reckless, unbelievably reckless. They're running, while they're shooting from 70 feet away at one of their own officers as he's wrestling with the suspect. I mean, try throwing a spoon into the sink from 10 feet away as you're running. And you might be able to do it, maybe not. It seems like a much harder task. Try hitting a target while you're standing still with a gun from 30 feet away. Try hitting without anything impeding it, without any movement. And you're talking about you're running and the target is moving. And one of the target, part of the target is connected to the target, rather, is a fellow officer, and you're shooting at him. That is crazy. It is unbelievably wild. And I can't believe that they have been protecting these officers for this long. But one last question for you on this. Can we tell from the tape if Antonio Williams actually was reaching for his gun? Is that something that we can see on ProPublica's review of the tape?
So that the initial struggle between Officer Mulkeen and Antonio Williams on the ground, where you hear both Officer Mulkeen and another officer who had gotten close to Mr. Williams, they both scream, he's reaching, or at least one of them is screaming, he's reaching. But you can't really tell whether or not he's got his hand on his gun.
Okay.
At that time, we do know that after everything happened, Mr. Williams's gun kind of ended up on the ground beside him. So presumably it had at some point come out of his waistband, but
never see that.
Yeah, no, it's really hard to tell what Antonio Williams was doing during that scuffle he had before he was killed.
Yeah, in light of not only this instance and their lack of any desire to get toward the actual truth, in addition to the past several hundred years, I'm not gonna take them saying he's reaching as the fact that he's actually reaching. You know what I mean? So, but
I should also add that his family has a lawsuit as well, and the central point in their lawsuit has to do with the officers choosing to stop him that night, and they said in the internal investigation after the fact that he appeared nervous and wide-eyed, and that's why they decided to drive up to where he was standing with another person and try to talk to him initially. And the Williams family disputes that they had good reason to stop him that night. So I should say I'm also very interested to see how that case plays out in court as well.
Absolutely. When we come forward, Mike, I want to ask you about your book right here on KBLA Talk 1580.
Is the pen mightier than the sword?
They say the pen is mightier than the sword. At KBLA Talk 1580, we not only have a lot to talk about, we have a lot to write about. Politics, relationships, business, empowerment, and culture. The all-star roster at KBLA Talk 1580 has you covered.
That's what it's all about.
Be sure to follow us on all our socials for our latest book releases, op-eds, essays, and commentaries from our hosts. And, of course, download the KBLA 1580 app as we strive to remain your most trusted, credible, and reliable source for the issues you care about. This is unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
What up, baby?
I'm young, gifted, and black.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we do more than just talk.
Hey there, I'm Jared Hill, president of the National Association of Black Journalists of Los Angeles, and I just want to say thank you for the benevolent $10,000 donation and scholarships for the next generation of black journalists.
And I'm Haywood Galbraith, photojournalist and founder of the Minority Photojournalism Institute. Thanks, KBLA, for your generous $10,000 scholarship gift to help us train the next generation of black photojournalists.
Congratulations to all the students who will benefit from the scholarship dollars raised at our Black History Month luncheon, honoring black legends in LA media. When we come forward at KBLA Talk 1580, we're bringing everybody with us. Everybody with us. Everybody with us. Everybody with us. Everybody with us.
Connection established. Access granted.
In a survey conducted by the public opinion research firm Eviderus, KBLA Talk 1580 consistently emerged as the station of choice for black audiences in the Los Angeles media market and beyond. The survey also revealed that the vast majority of black audiences are concerned about the lack of black-owned media and are more likely to listen to talk radio that focuses on issues that impact the black community. For some reason, the other talk stations haven't quite figured that out.
If you think about KFI, well, KFI only has like a 3% black listenership. 3%. So there's a good 97% out there to support a station like KBLA.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black. Your black. Your black.
Follow the leader.
KBLA Talk 1580.
Follow the leader.
Be sure to follow us on Instagram at KBLA 1580.
Follow the leader.
Are you ready?
The station leading the way with exclusive interviews,
Follow the leader.
stimulating conversation, and intellectual discourse that empowers, enlightens, and informs.
Follow the leader.
Follow the leader at KBLA 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
Keep following the leader.
Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader.
Gotta stay fresh, my house shot with a rest bar, shot with a rest bar, shot with a rest bar.
Have you visited us online for the grand opening of KBLA.store? For the best in new merch, gift ideas, books, media, and more, log on to KBLA.store. Be sure to check out our KBLA team favorites at KBLA.
I'm Avi Bernard in for Areva Martin today. And I've been having a very enlightening conversation with Mike Hayes, freelance journalist and author of The Secret Files, Bill de Blasio, the NYPD, and the Broken Promises of Police Reform. So, Mike, can you please tell us about that book?
Yeah, thanks for giving me an opportunity to plug the book here. So the book is a deep dive investigation into the NYPD's disciplinary system, which has been corrupt and not working particularly well for decades. However, the book focuses on what I think is a particularly interesting period of time, that being the tenure of Bill de Blasio as mayor of New York. He was a progressive politician who came into power claiming that he was going to clean things up and make the NYPD more accountable to the people in New York, and really make it a model for the rest of the country for how you could hold cops accountable and still do good policing in your community. Unfortunately, that's not really happened during the de Blasio years. He had to deal with a number of challenges along the way. But that doesn't change the fact that, as my book kind of focuses on the families of people who had their loved ones killed by police and fought for years to try to get justice for them. And, in the end, that didn't really happen. But I think the book's great for anyone who cares about the issue of police accountability and really wants to dig into kind of the politics and the inner workings of this in a major American city.
Well, that sounds great, Mike. And we have about 30 seconds. So where can we get the book from?
You can get it anywhere books are sold, Amazon, your local bookstore. It's available from Penguin Random House. And yeah, it's called The Secret Files. The Secret Files are literally a couple thousand secret NYPD disciplinary records that I got my hands on. So there's a good tale about that in the book. Hope some people go out and grab it.
All right, freelance journalist and author of The Secret Files, Bill de Blasio, the NYPD, and the Broken Promises of Police Reform. Thanks so much for joining us today, Mike.
Thanks for having me.
And when we come forward, it's going to be Robin Ayers with The Rob Report, all on your radio and on your TV screen. And don't you worry, Areva Martin will be right back in this seat tomorrow night. Not this seat because I'm at home, but she'll be in a seat on your radio and on your screen right here on KBLA Talk 1580. The Raw Report with Robin Ayers is next. I'm Avi Bernard, and I am gone.
This is a rather bold pronouncement, but we think we can back it up. If you come across a radio frequency anywhere putting more variety and more diversity on the air than KBLA Talk 1580, we sure would like to hear about your discovery.
You got to have vision.